Hello and welcome to another video of Mr. Quinn. Now today, as you know guys, we just finished Unit 2 and we're moving into Unit 3. So today we'll be covering Unit 3 all about quadratics. Now, what we want to know is how to identify key information from quadratic functions, right? This is actually our objective for today as well. We're going to determine the key information for the following quadratic functions that I will list below, and state each form when you have successfully converted it and can identify a key piece of information. Now, you're probably wondering, Mr. Quinn, what are you talking about? What's a quadratic function? Well, a quadratic function is a function that will always have x2 involved. Now, in the equation, this could also be a parent function where if it was graphed on a graph, y would equal x2, for example. Now, in this example right here, this is a quadratic function in standard form. Fx equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a will always equal 0 no matter what. Now, as I said below, we're not graphing, but it is important to know the fundamentals of this. So in this case, this is called a parabola. And whenever you have a quadratic function, also a parent function, also called a parent function, my bad, it will always be a U shape. Now I know this isn't the best drawn, but you get the point. Which will always be in this case, because this is y equals x squared. So, not only that, it's also important to know the three different forms that a quadratic has. So, as I said below, ignore this part. We won't be graphing in this video today. That'll be the next lesson. So, what are three forms of quadratic functions and what key information do they give to us? So, the first form is standard form. Standard form gives us the y-intercept. Now, an example of this would be fx equals x squared plus 7x plus 12. So, as you can see, this is the a variable, this is the b variable, and this is the c variable. So, the c variable will always be the y-intercept. In this case, the y-intercept is 12, which means when you put it on the homework, you're gonna want to put 0, 12 to signify that it's x and y. Now, the next form we have is factored form. This form gives us our x-intercepts because they're already given in the equation. Now, an example of this equation would be x plus 4 in parentheses times x plus 7 in parentheses. Now, here's something that my students always get confused, and I don't want you to get confused. So, even though it says plus 4 plus 7 and it gives us our x-intercepts, you need to remember that it's in parentheses. So, this will actually be negative 4 and this will be negative 7. So when you write it down on the homework or any kind of problem in the future, it'll be 0, negative 4, 0, negative 7. Oh wait, my bad. That's wrong. It would actually be negative 4, 0, and negative 7, 0. My bad. That's the correction for that. Now, the third form is vertex form. Now, vertex form, as said in the name, will provide to us the vertex that is given. So for an example, fx equals x plus 6 in parentheses squared minus 49. Here, you could already see that the vertex is given. Now remember our rule about the parentheses? X plus 6, so that's going to become negative 6, which will be our x variable. Negative 49, now that's not in parentheses, so don't get confused. That will remain as negative 49. Don't make the confusion into making it positive 49, because then it would be marked incorrect. So, that will be our y variable in this case. Anyways, it's important to know the equation that we're going to be using in this later on. One of the equations you're going to be using in some of these problems is b over 2 squared. which is an equation that's used to complete the square for vertex form. So, when is it used, Mr. Quinn? It could be used in standard form and factored form. But Mr. Quinn, isn't there 3 different forms? Why, yes, there is. There's vertex form. But because vertex form is already there, and it already gives you the vertex, there's no need to find the vertex again. Anyways, let's see some examples, right? My favorite part of the math. Now, you're always going to want to ask yourself the question. Let me see if we can. We're always going to want to ask ourselves the question. What piece of information can be identified first? So right here, we have the example, x squared plus 16x plus 60. Now, as you know, this is the a variable, the b variable, and the c variable, which means this is standard form. Which, what do we remember? Standard form obviously gives us the y-intercept. So we're going to circle that to signify what we already have. Now the y-intercept is 60, right? So it's gonna be really simple. What we're gonna do is, because you don't have to do this, but I like to write it because it's a memory for me. I like to put x and y below, just so I don't get confused. Now, in this case, because y is the y-intercept like we're finding, it's gonna be 60. And you're gonna put a 0, which means the y-intercept is 0, 60. Now, the next thing we have is to go into factored form. Give me a sec, I have a different sheet for the work. Okay, so as I was saying before, to convert into factored form, you're gonna want to, by the way, guys, I wrote steps actually on how to do this, just so you guys aren't confused. My bad, I should have said that. First, if you want, you're going to list the y-intercept already given, which is the c variable like we said before. Now, second, we're going to use the y-intercept number, and we're going to see what equals to b, in this case, into the b variable. So, you're probably wondering what I mean by that. Now, no need to be confused. This is really simple. So because 60 is our c variable, we're going to want to know what can multiply to get 60, but add or subtract to get 16. So we know that 10 and 6 can work, right? Because 10 times 6 is 60, and 10 plus 6 equals 16, which means this works perfectly. Now, you need to be careful when doing these because there's other examples, like you could probably say, but Mr. Quinn, negative 10 times negative 6 is also 60. But negative 10 plus negative 6 is negative 16, which means it wouldn't work for our b variable, which means 10 times 6 will obviously be 60. So how we're going to write this is, we're going to go f of x equals x plus 6 and x plus 10. Boom. Now you're in factored form. We'll just write this down right here. And boom. 2 pieces of information already provided. Now, what's next? Now, because we're in factored form, we're going to listen to our next thing. We've already converted into factored form, so that's correct. Now, as we said before, factored form gives us our x-intercepts. So, remember our rule. It's in parentheses. So it's not going to be 6 and 10. It's going to be negative 6 and negative 10. So your x-intercepts are going to be negative 6, 0. Remember x and y. And it's going to be negative 10, 0. Boom! You just got the x-intercepts too. Now what our next question is asking, how can we convert this into vertex form? We've already completed step 4. So we're going to use the equation that we already have to complete the square for vertex form. Now, what I mean by saying this is we're going to use the equation that I mentioned before. We're going to do, can you see that? We're going to do b over 2 squared to get us that. Now, what is our b variable? You're going to want to ignore this and go back to your regular equation. So in this case, this is b. So 16 divided by 2 squared is 16 divided by 2 is 8 squared equals 64, right? Boom. Now, to complete the square, you're going to write this like this. X squared plus 16x plus 64. Now, remember, you're going to want to write this in parentheses, and you're going to want to put a line right here. And you're going to leave out the 60 and put that right here, actually. Now, because we added here, we're going to subtract here 60 minus 64. Now we can complete the square. This we don't have to do anything for, right? But 60 minus 64 is negative 4. So, we could write this right here. Negative 4 is going to be what we want to find. Now, remember, now that we used the completing the square vertex form equation, we're going to want to know what is 64 that adds to get 16. The same thing like we did before. So, we know that 8 times 8 equals 64, right? And 8 plus 8 is 16. So, that means this is going to become f of x equals x plus 8 plus x plus 8 again minus 4. Boom. Now, to convert this into vertex form, you always want to have like the same variable. It's an easier way to do it. So, because we have the same thing here, 2 x's and 2 8's, we're going to do f of x equals x plus 8 squared, to show that there's 2, minus 4. Boom. You have your vertex form. Now we're going to write that right here in our notes. And boom. You have that all completed. Now, as I said before, what would be our vertex? Well, that's simple. It would be negative 8 and negative 4. Because remember, negative 8 would be converted from positive to negative because of the parentheses. So, remember, like I said, I like to put x and y. So it's going to be negative 8 and it's going to be negative 4. Boom. And there you go, guys. You've just completed your first ever standard form equation. Now, let's move into the next problem. Actually, guys, really quick, I forgot to mention this before, but going back to the first couple 2 steps, if you ever want to check your work to see if this equation is right, that it goes back to the factored form that you put it in and everything, you're actually going to want to put, okay, give me a sec. Okay, so to check the work, we're going to put it right here. Oh, you can't see that. Okay. Now, and this is going back to right here and right here, by the way, just so you don't get confused. So, as the regular thing was, it was f of x equals x squared plus 16x plus 60. And we changed it to be f of x equals x plus 6 and x plus 10. Now, how can we check our work, right? To check that this is the right thing. Now, if you FOIL these out, it'll add back to this original equation. So here's how you do it. X squared, boom, plus 6x, x times 6 is plus 6x, and x times 10 is plus 10x. Now don't forget 6 times x plus 60. Now you're going to want to combine these to make it x squared plus 16x plus 60. And boom, you went back to your original equation and you have a way how to check your work. And then as the steps follow after that. Now, let's move into our second problem, right? So our second problem says, remember the question we always have to ask, what piece of information can be identified first? Now, the second problem is f of x equals x minus 3 squared minus 4. So, we know that this is in vertex form because you already know that the vertex is given. So step 1, put the numbers that are given for the vertex from the vertex equation. So, as we said, x and y, the vertex is going to be positive 3 and it's going to be negative 4. First thing done, first step done. And now you're going to want to convert it into standard form. Now, to convert it into standard form, you're going to want to repeat this twice, like how we did it before. You're going to want to convert it into a factored form in a way. So it's going to be x, it's going to be, how can I do this? It's okay. Okay, so this is going to be x minus 3 and x minus 3, which is what f of x equals. Now, while doing that, we want to convert it into standard form, right? So, you're going to want to do the same thing that you did before. You're going to want to follow it out. So, f of x equals x squared, x times 3 minus 3x times x minus 3 minus 3x plus negative 3 times negative 3 plus 9. Oh, and don't forget the negative 4 here, my bad. Minus 4. So, to convert this into standard form, because this is 5 variables in this case, you're going to do the same thing I did before. Negative 3 and negative 3. You're going to combine those, and you're going to put 9 and minus 9 minus 4. Combine those. So this is going to become x squared minus 6x, because a negative 3 plus a negative 3 gets you more negative. So negative 6x, 9 minus 4, plus 5. Boom! You just got into standard form now. So we could write that down as standard form equaling x squared minus 6x plus 5. So that is done. That means step 2 is done. Step 3 is done. Now remember what we said. Standard form gives us our y-intercept, which means our y-intercept is 5. So, like I said, x and y. 0 for x and 5 would be the y-intercept. Boom! 3 pieces of information already. Oh, you could see that, right? Okay. So, what our next step is asking now is to convert it into factored form. Now, if you want to convert this kind of thing into factored form, you're going to want to do kind of the same thing that we did before. So, as we know, 5 is our y-intercept, right? So, we're going to put 5 right here. So, what multiplies to make 5 and can add or subtract to get into negative 6? So, we know that 5 times 1 is 5, but that won't work. So, what if we tried negative 5 times negative 1? Negative 5 times negative 1 still gets you positive 5, and, in fact, negative 5 plus negative 1 gets you negative 6. So, boom! We're going to do what we did before. We're going to make this fx equals x minus 5 and times x minus 1. Boom, you have that, right? Already into factored form. Now, this is all optional, guys. You don't have to do this, but I like to check my work. So, if you want to check that this is right for this type of problem, you're going to want to do, you're going to want to follow it out basically again. So you're going to do x squared, x times that, minus 5x, x minus 5x, x minus 1, minus 1x, and then you're going to do negative 5 times negative 1 to make it positive 5. Boom. And then you're going to combine these two again, right, to get ABC, and you're going to make this x squared minus 6x, because these two add, plus 5. And that's how you could check your work, to go back to this problem right here. Now, let's write down the key information that we have. Our factored form, as we know, is x minus 5 and x minus 1. So we're going to write down right here, x minus 5, x minus 1. Factored form done. Now remember, it gives us our x-intercepts. So, remember x and y. So, our x-intercept is going to be positive 5, 0. It's going to be positive 1, and it's going to be 0. Boom! And you just solved your second equation. Now, here's the steps like we said. We convert it into factor form. The y-intercept number summed up to be in the equation. And then we listed the x-intercepts given from factored form to complete this problem of everything that it was asking of us. And remember, the optional is check your work, so you don't necessarily have to do that. So here's the work for 1 and 2. Now let's move into our third and our fourth problem. So our third problem asks the same thing. We're going to want to know what piece of information can be identified first that we already know. So, as we know, x minus 8 and x minus 10. Well, we've seen this before, right? So this is factored form. So we already know that this is factored form. And it's going to give us the x-intercepts that we already have. Oh, by the way, for the second one, I forgot to put this, but because this is vertex form, remember that it always gives you the vertex. Anyways, going back to this. This is factored form, right? So we're going to want to find out the next following steps. So, I've listed them out. List the x-intercept given from the equation. So, we know that it's x minus 8 and x minus 10. So, parentheses rule again, it's going to obviously be x and y again. It's going to be positive 8, 0, and 10, 0. Boom. X-intercepts completed. Now, the next thing we want to do, right, is FOIL to convert it into standard form. So, let me get my practice work sheet. F of x equals x minus 8 times x minus 10. So if we want to convert into standard form, we know the rule. We're going to basically multiply these again. So we're going to put, I'm just going to rewrite this real quick, x minus 8 and x minus 10. So we're going to follow it out. X squared minus 8x times minus 10 minus 10x, and then negative 8 times negative 10 is positive 80. Now, you're going to combine these again, and you're going to make it x squared minus 18x plus 80. So, boom, we have our standard form now. Now, to put our standard form, we're going to put x squared minus 18x plus 80, and we finish the next step. Now the next step is, that's the y-intercept given, we already did that. Use equation for completing the square. That's our next step. Our next step is we want to find the y-intercept. So the y-intercept in this case is a c variable, which is 80. So x and y again, it's going to be 0 for x and 80 because 80 was given as a c variable. So boom, y-intercept done. Now moving into our next step, we're going to use the equation to complete the square once again. Now remember, this is factored form. So we need to use it in this case if we want to find out vertex form. We didn't have to use that for number 2 because that was already in vertex form. So vertex form, f of x. To find vertex, we're going to use b over 2 squared to find our number to the equation. So b over 2 squared, as you know, we're going to use, in this case, we're not going to go back to this because this can't give us a, b, and c. We have to use the one we just got. So it's going to be negative 18 divided by 2 squared. Negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9. Negative 9 squared makes it positive 81. So we ask ourselves the same question. How can we add this to this? So we're going to do x squared minus 18x, in parentheses by the way, plus the new number we got given, 81, parentheses, and remember, we're going to leave out 80 and we're going to put that right here, minus 81. Boom. This one we leave again, right? And this is going to become 80 minus 81 equals negative 1, which is what we're going to put at the end of our new vertex form. So this is where we ask the question, what goes into negative 18 that 81 multiplies into? So we know that positive 9 and positive 9 can get us 81, but that won't work because 9 plus 9 is positive 18. So this won't work in this case. So in this case, we're going to want to do negative 9 times negative 9 because that gets us positive 81. And negative 9 plus negative 9 gets us negative 18. So we're going to do f of x equals x minus 9 and x minus 9 minus 1. Boom. You have your vertex form already completed. Or not yet, my bad. Now this is the same thing. Remember our rule that because it's the same number, we can combine them. So it's going to be f of x equals x minus 9 squared minus 1. That's going to be our vertex. Now, if you want to check if this is right to get us back into this, you're basically going to do this. To check your work, where can I put this? I'm just going to put it right here. You're going to put x minus 9 and x minus 9 minus 1. You're going to do the same thing as you did before. FOIL it out. X squared minus 9x minus 9x, negative 9 times negative 9 plus 81, and you're not going to include this. Now negative 9 plus negative 9, negative 18, so x squared minus 18x plus 81. This brings us back to what we had before, which is right here. That's how you can check your work to know if this is correct. So, as we've concluded, the vertex form, in this case, would be x minus 9 squared minus 1. Boom. And as we know, this becomes positive 9, and this stays the same and becomes negative 1. So, oh my bad, can you see that? Boom. We just got our third problem completed. We added the number to the equation for completing the square, used a number to find two numbers to add up to it, list the number repeated twice, we did that, and combined it to get vertex form and vertex. Now optional, like we did before, above and beyond, we checked our work. So number 3 is completed. Now one more and one final problem. I know you guys are tired of me talking about math, but don't worry. This is going to be exactly fine. So I decided let's do another factored one, right? Because we just did that. That's pretty easy, and let's refresh on our steps. So x plus 7 times x minus 5 is what we're given. So as we know, we have our x-intercepts. This is going to be xy, xy. It's going to be -7, 0. And it's going to be +5, 0. Boom. X-intercept's done. Now we're going to want to do the same thing that we did for number 3 into number 4. Oh, wait, actually, I left some space right here. Okay. So I'm just going to rewrite this. F of x equals x plus 7 and x minus 5. You're going to want to FOIL this out to make it x squared, x times 7 plus 7x, x times -5 minus 5x, and 7 times -5, well, in this case, would be -35 because the negative wins in this case. So we're going to want to combine these again to make this x squared plus 2x minus 35, which gives you your standard form. Boom, 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 boom. We're going to put this x squared plus 2x minus 35. So that's completed. And I didn't list out the steps for this one because you should know it's the same as number 3. So just look back if you get a little bit confused, or you could email me at the same time. So we're going to we need to find the y-intercept. So x and y. Y-intercept's already given. It's going to be -35. It's going to be 0 for x. Boom. Only 2 more steps. Oh, I'm so sorry. Only 2 more steps to go. So we're going to, for vertex form, we're going to follow the steps again, and we're going to use our equation because this is a factored. Meaning, oh, I forgot to say this again, what piece of information can be identified first? We figured out that it was the x-intercepts because this is factored form. Sorry, my bad, I keep forgetting about that. But anyways, the vertex form is where we're going to use the equation again. B over 2 squared, meaning because we can't use this one again, so we have to go back to the new equation that we just made, A, B, C. So it's going to be 2 divided by 2 squared, which 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 1 squared equals 1. Now, we're going to write this out. F of x equals, what's something that 1 goes into that 2 goes into? Well, we know that 1 times 1 is 2 when you add that together. 1 plus 1 is 2. So we're going to do f of x equals x plus 1 and times x plus 1 to get that as that. And remember, after that, we can add this, we can add the plus 1 to complete the square. So we're going to do fx, this is actually the step before, I'm sorry, but technically, yeah, okay, you could do this, but anyways, I like to do it the other way, so I should have started like that. But this is going to be x squared plus 2x plus 1 minus 35 minus 1. So this one we ignore, this one we keep the same. Minus 35 minus 1 equals -36, which is what we're going to add to our new factored form. Or vertex form, my bad. So this is going to be -36, which means, let's bring this down here, f of x equals, because we can combine these because they're the same thing. X plus 1 squared, because there's two x's, minus 36, which means that we just completed our vertex form. So we could write that down real quick. And boom, we got that step completed now. Now to get the vertex, we know how we can do that. Positive 1 becomes negative 1, x and y, and it stays as negative 36. Boom. And you just completed how to identify information for quadratic equations. So, as you know, I always have a homework assignment that I would be assessing. So, I gave you one in standard form. I'm not going to go over these, by the way, but we have one in standard form, one in vertex form, one in factored form, another one in vertex form, and our fifth and final problem in standard form. Now, this is due next week, so I will be waiting for your response. But thank you once again for watching my video, and I hope you enjoyed Unit 3 of Quadratics.